Yamunatiravanachari Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Kishore Kishori Jaya Kishore Kishori Jaya Kishore Kishori Jaya Kishore Kishori Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bo Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Pastacha Deshatarine. Today we're reading from Grantaraj Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 7, Chapter 5, Prahlad, the saintly son of Hiranyakashipu. And we are continuing our reading of texts 23 and 24. 23 is written on the board, so maybe we can just responsively chant that. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text 23. Shri Parada Uvacha Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam padasevanam Archanam vandanam dasyam Sakyam atma nivedanam. So, okay. Shri Parada Uvacha Smaranam padasevanam Archanam vandanam dasyam Sakyam atma nivedanam. Shri Parada Uvacha Shravanam kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam padasevanam Archanam vandanam dasyam Sakyam atma nivedanam. One more. Shri Parada Uvacha Shravanam kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam padasevanam Archanam Sakyamat Vedanam. Text 24. Ittipum sarpita Vishnu bhaktischan navalakshana kriyeta bhagavat yadha tanmanye ditam uttamam. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Are we doing the word for words, even though you've probably gone through it? Okay, we can skip the word for word synonyms. We'll go directly to the translation. Prahlad Maharaj said, hearing and chanting about the transcendental holy name, form, qualities, paraphernalia, and pastimes of Lord Vishnu, remembering them, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, offering the Lord respectful worship with 16 types of paraphernalia, offering prayers to the Lord, becoming His servant, considering the Lord one's best friend, and surrendering everything unto Him. In other words, serving Him with the body, mind, and words. These 9 processes are accepted as pure devotional service. One who has dedicated his life to the service of Krishna through these 9 methods should be understood to be the most learned person, for he has acquired complete knowledge. So the Vedic literatures, including Srimad Bhagvatam, only discuss 3 topics or 3 areas of knowledge. Sambandha Jnana, which is knowledge about the absolute truth and our relationship with that absolute truth. Next is Abhideya Jnana, which means how do we actually act or interact with that absolute truth, the processes for doing so. And then Prayojana Jnana, a description of the results, a sharing of realizations and revelations about the fruits of such a relationship. So this verse spoken by Prahlad Maharaj is a very, very important verse in Srimad Bhagvatam because it falls in the category of what? Which one of those 3 jnanas does this verse fall into? Abhideya. What is the process of devotional service? So yesterday we were speaking that there's lots of dogmatic religion out there. And dogmatic religion or dogmatic science or whatever is out there means that we just give you a bunch of information and you just have to accept it. And maybe we give you some rituals or like external things that you're supposed to do, but they don't provide a methodology or a technology for how we can actually apply Sambandha Jnana in our life so that we can actually realize the prayojana. So Sambandha divorced from Abhideya is worthless. Just like a man and a woman come together, what is the fruit of their coming together? The fruit of a man and woman coming together is children. But if you just have a man or you just have a woman, are you going to get any children? So Sambandha Jnana, divorced from Abhideya, will never give the offspring of prayojana. So this verse is extremely important because it's revealing what is the process of Abhideya. So Prahlad Maharaj is delineating 9 basic categories of activities in devotional service. And he concludes by saying that a person who actually has dedicated his life to this practice of Abhideya, practicing these 9 processes of devotional service, that person should be understood to be the most learned because he's actually acquired complete knowledge. That implies that there's something called incomplete knowledge. So incomplete knowledge, again, would be Sambandha divorced from Abhideya. Just walking around with a bunch of book knowledge in our head, but not knowing how to apply it. That's called incomplete knowledge. It's like an incomplete family if you have a man or a woman, but you don't have the spouse. One parent, not the other parent. So complete knowledge means theoretical knowledge and the application, knowledge of the application. So this is a very, very, very important verse. It has a long purport, so for a few days, devotees have been speaking on this verse by taking a small section of the purport. So today, we're going to begin reading Srila Prabhupada's purport, and we'll begin on paragraph number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Paragraph number 5. The Gopal Tapani Upanishad says that the word bhakti means engagement in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not of anyone else. This Upanishad describes that bhakti is the offering of devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in these 2 sentences, Srila Prabhupada has smashed the idea of the Bhakti Fest, which occurs in America and perhaps elsewhere. They hold this, the yoga community holds this big fancy thing called the Bhakti Fest. But there's absolutely no mention of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. In fact, 2 of our devotees, Shamagopi and Shamasaki, went to the Bhakti Fest in Madison, Wisconsin a couple of weekends ago to distribute books, and they've done it for a couple of years. And you know what they were told? Don't put on your table any of Srila Prabhupada's books because those books talk about Krishna. Those books are religious books. They talk about God. Don't put any of those books. So they had to put on their table, the higher taste, coming back, the perfection of yoga. So covertly, they had to get Prabhupada's Krishna conscious message in there. But the Bhakti Fest actually has a rule that you cannot distribute literature or speak as one of the, scheduled speakers at the Bhakti Fest. You cannot do that if you're going to bring God into the picture. So what is this Bhakti Fest? Prabhupada clearly says here and in many places, bhakti wholly and solely, exclusively means devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. And that verse was spoken on the other day, Anyabilashita shunyam jnanakarmadyanavritam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktir uttamam. Exclusively, Krishna is the sole recipient of bhakti. So by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, we can prevent ourselves from getting bewildered by all the hodgepodge broadcasting that's going on out there in the name of bhakti or spirituality or what have you. Actually, the Hare Krishna movement does have a monopoly on bhakti. So continuing Srila Prabhupada's purport, to perform devotional service, one should be relieved of the bodily conception of life and aspirations to be happy through elevation to the higher planetary systems. We better close the book and pack our bags and go home. Drop out. Because look what Prabhupada just said. What did Prabhupada just say? You have to be relieved of the bodily conception of life to perform devotional service. Well, Hare Krishna, I'm not in that category, so see you later. So what's Srila Prabhupada saying? To perform devotional service to Krishna, one has to be completely free of the bodily conception of life. The rest of us have to perform devotional service through the Guru Parampara to Krishna. None of us, even the pujaris who are on the altar, touching the lotus feet of the Lord, bathing the Lord, dressing the Lord, feeding the Lord, we are not doing direct devotional service to Krishna. And if we think we are doing it incorrectly. So we perform what's called sadhana bhakti, devotional service in practice. We are apprentices. So we perform our devotional service through the Guru Parampara. It's direct, but it's not direct. It's simultaneously direct and indirect. But our understanding is that our devotional service is not accepted directly from our hand into Krishna's hand. Rather, whatever we're doing, that little pathetic stuff that we're doing that we call devotional service, we offer it to our spiritual master. And our spiritual master is so merciful that despite how pathetic that thing is, the spiritual master accepts it out of mercy and hands it up the ladder, the Guru Parampara, and finally it comes into Radharani's hand, and Srimati Radharani, being the most merciful, she turns and hands it to Krishna. And Krishna accepts anything that comes from Radharani's hand. He doesn't even scan it to make sure it's, free from viruses or whatever. He doesn't give it a second thought. If it's coming from Radharani's hand, it's accepted. If it gets into Srimati Radharani's hand, that means it's in Krishna's hand. So how are we going to get anything that we have to offer into Srimati Radharani's hand? By offering to our spiritual master. The spiritual master, Prabhupada says, is a representative of either Srimati Radharani or Nityananda Prabhu. Same mercy. So this is Prabhupada saying we must be relieved of the bodily conception of life to actually render devotional service. He's giving us an appreciation of what devotional service really is. Now he continues, in other words, work performed simply for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord without any desire for material benefits is called bhakti. Bhakti is also called nishkarma, or freedom from the results of fruitive activity. Bhakti and nishkarma are on the same platform, although devotional service and fruitive activity appear almost the same. So fruitive activity means performing an action which is going to reap a reaction. And nishkarma means avoiding activities that reap reactions. So we remain, inert. We don't perform activities because we don't want to get reactions. Well, devotional service, bhakti, it looks like both. It looks like fruitive activity because we're very active, we're doing things, and we are doing it for a purpose. We want something to come out of it, namely the pleasure of Krishna. But it also looks like nishkarma because it's not a material activity which reaps results. So bhakti is like the dialectic, if you will, between karma and nishkarma. It is the perfect activity. Continuing, the 9 different processes enunciated by Prahlad Maharaj, who learned them from Narada Muni, may not all be required for the execution of devotional service. If a devotee performs only one of these 9 without deviation, he can attain the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes it is found that when one performs one of the processes, other processes are mixed with it. That is not improper for a devotee. When a devotee executes any one of the 9 processes, navalakshana, this is sufficient. The other 8 processes are included. Now let us discuss these 9 different processes. So this point, I'm sure, has been discussed already, that every one of those 9 processes of devotional service necessarily involves other processes of devotional service, and hearing and chanting is that common thread that permeates all of them. So how does deity worship, for example, at the Hare Krishna temple differ from deity worship going on in just something that's labeled as a Hindu temple or a Christian church or a Jewish synagogue or a Muslim mosque? The difference is that the deity worship is actually accompanied by or infused with hearing and chanting by the pure devotees of the Lord. So it's the hearing and chanting. When Prabhupada would install deities, like in Vrindavan, India, in 1975, Srila Prabhupada installed Radha Shyamasundar, Krishna Balaram, and Gaura-Nitai. And because he was concerned that the Smarta Brahmanas, or those who are influenced by the Smarta Brahmanas, would not consider the installation of these deities to be, bona fide and legitimate and what have you, he invited many Paka Brahmanas to come and perform all the gorgeous rituals and chant all the mantras and pour the ghee just right and use all the proper paraphernalia. And he arranged all that. But he told his disciples, they were having kirtan while all of this was going on, and he told his disciples the actual installation of the deities occurred because we were chanting Hare Krishna. So this is the essence of everything, the hearing and the chanting. So I'd like to read just one paragraph from process number 1, Shravanam. Hearing of the holy name of the Lord, Shravanam, is the beginning of devotional service. Although any one of the 9 processes is sufficient, in chronological order, the hearing of the holy name of the Lord is the beginning. Indeed, it is essential. As enunciated by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. By chanting the holy name of the Lord, one is cleansed of the material conception of life, which is due to the dirty modes of material nature. When the dirt is cleansed from the core of one's heart, one can realize the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ishvara Paramakrishna Satchidananda Vigraha. Thus, by hearing the holy name of the Lord, one comes to the platform of understanding the personal form of the Lord. After realizing the Lord's form, one can realize the transcendental qualities of the Lord. And when one can understand his transcendental qualities, one can understand the Lord's associates. In this way, a devotee advances further and further toward complete understanding of the Lord as he awakens in realization of the Lord's holy name, transcendental form and qualities, his paraphernalia, and everything pertaining to him. Therefore, the chronological process is Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. This same process of chronological understanding holds true in chanting and remembering. When the chanting of the holy name, form, qualities, and paraphernalia is heard from the mouth of a pure devotee, his hearing and chanting are very pleasing. Srila Sanatana Goswami has forbidden us to hear the chanting of an artificial devotee or non-devotee. So, Srila Prabhupada, at the beginning of this paragraph, mentioned that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has taught that by chanting the holy name of the Lord, one is cleansed of the material conception of life, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Cheto means the consciousness or the mind. Darpana means the mirror. And Marjanam means cleansing. So what image does a mirror have? What image does a mirror have? Sorry? My reflection? What image does a mirror have? None. Okay, what else? Whatever object is in front of it. On its own, the mirror has absolutely no image. The only image found on the mirror is that image which is standing in front of it. Right? So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said we have to cleanse the mirror of our consciousness. What image does consciousness have? Whatever's in front of it, just like a mirror. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not just like, oh, let's be poetic and just choose some words that sound nice. This is very scientific. Everything he says, very succinct and powerful. Every word he means, just like Prabhupada, every word he chooses, he means the word that he is choosing. Sometimes people think Prabhupada chose the wrong word or he used a word incorrectly. Every word Prabhupada is using, he meant it in full. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu literally means that our consciousness is like a mirror. Consciousness itself has absolutely no image. The only image that a consciousness has is whatever is put in front of it. Now, if we put some ugly thing in front of the mirror, then a very ugly image is shown. If we put a beautiful thing in front of the mirror, a very beautiful thing is there in the mirror. Now the analogy isn't perfect with material mirrors, because material mirrors, once the image is gone, once the object is gone from the face of the mirror, then the mirror has no more image. But our consciousness is a little different than mirrors that are made of glass. Our consciousness holds the images that were projected in front of it. Therefore, we have what are called impressions or samskaras. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that we have what's called dust on our mirror of consciousness. So due to many, many lifetimes of putting mundane sounds and sights and flavors and tastes and textures, by spending many, many lifetimes putting these mundane objects in front of our consciousness, we have left indelible marks on our consciousness. Indelible means the object goes away, but it's left a permanent impression. And it will remain forever permanent. It can never be washed away by any kind of scouring detergent. You can't scrape it with a knife. You can't use turpentine. Nothing is going to remove the impressions that have been left on the chaita or consciousness. Except one thing. And what is that one thing? Krishna and anything in relation to Krishna. That means if we hear the holy name of Krishna, if we hear about Krishna, about his form, about his qualities, about his associates, about his paraphernalia, about his abode, about his activities, if we hear about those things or we see those things, we can see the deities, such mercy. Why would anyone not want to see the deity every day? If we can taste the remnants of the deity, etc., etc. Anything in connection with Krishna, any sensual, mental, or intellectual activity which is somehow related to Krishna, Krishna's devotees, Krishna's holy dham, those impressions now, not only are they reflecting from the mirror of our consciousness, but they also melt away, dissolve away the material impressions that have been permanently marked there. So, we have a choice. We can either, before I say that, of all the sensual, mental, and intellectual stimuli that we put in front of our consciousness, it's explained that sound is the most effective, the most impressionable. And why is sound, out of all the different inputs that we can have, sound, right, sight, feelings, tastes, smells, why out of all those stimuli, why is sound the most effective? It carries ideas, and more technically, it carries information, but ideas. Prabhupada uses the example that if somebody is sleeping and a fire develops in the house, and you want to warn that person that, my dear friend, there is a fire in your house, you better take a hike. Okay, this is a multiple test exam. Please pull out your number 2 pencils and color in the little bubble next to the right answer. And here's your choices. How will you go about doing this? A, you will take a placard and write on it, "My dear friend, there is a fire in the house," and put it in front of his eyes. Or B, you will push the smoke over to him so he can smell it. Or C, you will bring some burning piece of whatever and put it on his tongue so he can taste it. Or D, you will bring the fire close to him so he can feel the warmth. Or E, you will say, "Fire, fire!" F is none of the above. And that means you get an F. So what was the right answer? Fire, fire. Because by saying fire, fire, all the information is there. The person wakes up, they jump out of bed, and they run out the closest exit. You need not say anything else. One time, somebody raised an objection. "Well, when I'm sleeping, sometimes I can't hear my alarm clock, and I think that you could really wake me up better by shaking me." Okay, let's take that challenge. Sure, if I shake you, I pour a cup of cold water on your face, I poke you. Sure, maybe you'll wake up. But by waking up, do you know what to do? All you did was wake up. Huh? What? Huh? And that's all. I just keep poking you. Huh? What? What? Stop bothering me. So, there may be methods of getting somebody aroused from their slumber, but what's the method of giving them the positive information about what they're supposed to do? That is sound vibration. Just by my saying, "Fire, fire," I need not say anything else. I don't have to say, "Get out of bed, run to the exit, open the door, go out." All the information is there in sound. Therefore, Ceto Darpana Marjanam means beginning with Shravanam, that we must hear the transcendental alarm clock. And what is that transcendental alarm clock? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But where and from whom are we going to hear the Maha Mantra? Because the sound has a quality to it. The information is not material. Material sound vibrations carry material sound. Transcendental sound vibrations carry transcendental information because of the consciousness of the speaker. So if we hear the very, very same Hare Krishna Maha Mantra from a Mayavadi, right? You can go to the Bhakti Fest. You can go to the Bhakti Fest and hear Hare Krishna Kirtan by Mayavadis, non-devotees, pseudo-devotees. Will that result in Ceto Darpana Marjanam? No. Quite the opposite. In fact, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu warned that if we heard from the lips of such a non-devotee, it would have negative effects. Prabhupada said it would be like drinking milk that's been touched by the lips of a poisonous serpent. It'll have a negative effect, not just neutral, it'll be downright negative. So, hearing the holy name, Prabhupada said in the purport here, that spiritual life begins, Chaitodarpana Marjanam begins, when we hear the holy name from the lips of a pure devotee. So, in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagvatam, in the 20th chapter of that canto, Prithu Maharaj is speaking to Lord Vishnu, who has appeared in his sacrificial arena after being pleased by his sacrifices. When Lord Vishnu comes, after being pleased by your sacrifice, he generally asks you, yes, what would you like? What benediction would you like? How can I help you? Prithu Maharaj answered like this. He said that I do not want liberation. I'm not at all interested in liberation. But here's what, I don't want any benediction, actually, 0. But I want one benediction. I want the benediction of at least, that means not less than, I want the benediction of at least 1,000,000 ears. I might look a little funny with 1,000,000 ears. But why do I want 1,000,000 ears? Because then I will be able to hear about the glories of your lotus feet from the mouths of your pure devotees. So Srila Prabhupada says in the purport that Maharaj Prithu wanted to have 1,000,000 ears to hear the glories of the lotus feet of the Lord. He specifically mentioned that the glories of the Lord should emanate from the mouths of pure devotees who speak from the cores of their hearts. Now, what does that mean? They speak from the cores of their hearts. We'll get to that in a minute, because this is very, very important. It is stated in the beginning of Srimad Bhagvatam, Shuka Mukhad Amrita Drava Samyutam. The nectar of Srimad Bhagvatam became more relishable because it emanated from the mouth of Srila Shukadeva Goswami. One might think that these glories of the Lord can be heard from anywhere, from the mouths of either devotees or non-devotees, but here it is specifically mentioned that the glories of the Lord must emanate from the mouths of pure devotees. So, Prabhupada said that one must hear the holy name and the glories of the Lord from the mouths of pure devotees. Why? Because they speak from the cores of their hearts. So what does it mean that they speak from the cores of their hearts? So here in the next purport, Srila Prabhupada explains. A pure devotee always engages in the service of the Lord, taking shelter of his lotus feet. Now, where is the Lord situated? One of the places that the Lord is situated, actually, the Lord himself says, I'm not situated in Vaikuntha. Where am I situated? I'm situated where my glories are being chanted by my devotees, because I'm actually situated in the heart of my devotee. So the Lord is situated in the heart of the pure devotee. And a pure devotee always engages in the service of the Lord, taking shelter of his lotus feet. And therefore, he has a direct connection with the saffron mercy particles that are strewn over the lotus feet of the Lord. Although, when a pure devotee speaks, the articulation of his voice may resemble the sound of this material sky, the voice is spiritually very powerful because it touches the particles of saffron dust on the lotus feet of the Lord. You understand? We speak with our vocal cords, the air that comes in and out of our lungs, our lips, our teeth, our tongue. That's what we speak with. So our mundane vibrations are lip deep, or maybe vocal cord deep. But a pure devotee is not simply speaking with the mechanism of the biological body. The pure devotee's consciousness is always with his head at the lotus feet of Krishna in his heart. And because he has his head at the lotus feet of Krishna in his heart, his words, he is in direct contact with the saffron mercy particles strewn on the lotus feet of the Lord, so that when the pure devotee speaks, his voice, what's the word? It's permeated with the saffron mercy particles coming from the lotus feet of the Lord. It is not a sound vibration of this material world, made up of sound waves that travel through space. So Prabhupada says, as soon as a sleeping, living entity hears the powerful voice emanating from the mouth of a pure devotee, he immediately remembers his eternal relationship with the Lord. Although up until that moment, he had forgotten everything. Shravanam. Shravanam does not mean academic hearing. Shravanam means hearing the holy name and everything else in relation to Krishna, but beginning with the holy name, because Atha Shri Krishna Namadi Nabhavad Grayam Indriyai Sevan Mukhe Jivado Swayam Eva Sparati Yada, that if we use our tongue to chant the holy name, everything else will follow. The form, the qualities, the pastimes, etc. of the Lord. But how are we going to chant the holy name if we haven't heard the holy name properly? Speaking is an overflow. Chanting is an overflow of hearing. What you will speak if you have not heard properly. There's no cup of water here, but let's pretend there's a cup of water here. Why am I able to pour water out of this cup? Because there's water in it. But if the cup is empty, I cannot pour any water from it. So a person who has not heard properly from the lips of a pure devotee, they should not speak. Because what will pour out of their cup? It won't be saffron nectar permeated with mercy particles. It'll be some other thing. It'll be an intoxicant, a material intoxicant. Intoxicant. What does that mean? Toxin. To intake toxins. to consume poison. So if a person has not heard properly the holy name and the glories of the holy name from the lips of a pure devotee, then all they can speak is toxic waste. So, I hope we have all heard, thank you very much. We have all heard that the pure devotee is living still in sound, yes? Anybody not heard that? He reasons ill who thinks that Vaishnavas die, for he is living still in sound. We understand that Srila Prabhupada has not died. He may have disappeared from our gross vision in his biological form. Of course, we still have his beautiful murtis in our temples. Prabhupada's murti in Chicago is my favorite one. I think he's most beautiful. So in that sense, he's visible to our eyes. But Srila Prabhupada is still living in sound. And if we don't take advantage of hearing Srila Prabhupada, how are we going to make any advancement? We have to hear from somebody on the level of Srila Prabhupada. We can hear from people who represent Srila Prabhupada, who represent Srila Prabhupada, even though they themselves may not be on such a level. But that cannot be divorced from, nor can it eclipse or outweigh or dwarf our hearing directly from Srila Prabhupada. The Bhaktivedanta archives did not spend 4 decades and hundreds and thousands of dollars to preserve Srila Prabhupada's audio recordings just so that they can sit there and collect dust. They did all that sacrifice and seva so that we can hear. One time, somebody challenged that, oh, you people who advocate hearing from Srila Prabhupada post-1977, that you people who advocate daily, directly hearing from Srila Prabhupada, you guys are in illusion. Because when it says that Srila Prabhupada is still living in sound, it means that he's living in the sound of his disciples, that you have to hear from a living personality. It means that you have to hear, your hearing is insufficient, or it's not really working, it's not going to have effect unless you hear from the living representative of Srila Prabhupada. And their argument was like this, that when this was a Prabhupada disciple speaking, of course, he said, when we were around in Prabhupada's time, we heard directly from Srila Prabhupada. But you folks who have come past 1977, you can't hear directly from Srila Prabhupada. You can only hear the taped recordings of Srila Prabhupada, and that's different. Have you heard this argument? Have you heard this argument? Oh, there are people who are arguing like this very strongly, that hearing Prabhupada's recorded words is not the same as hearing from him face to face. Therefore, we have a monopoly on hearing from Srila Prabhupada, and the rest of you have to come to a living Mahabhagavat to hear from them. Because they say reading's not the same. You have to literally hear from the lips of a pure devotee. So I raised this counter-argument. Say Srila Prabhupada is sitting right here in his biological form, speaking Srimad Bhagvatam, chanting Hare Krishna, etc. And you're sitting here in the class. Are you hearing directly from the lips of Srila Prabhupada? How, when Srila Prabhupada was sitting on the Vyasasan, speaking into the microphone to the assembled devotees, how were those devotees hearing Srila Prabhupada? I'll pose the question one more time. When the devotees were sitting in the temple room and Prabhupada was speaking Bhagvatam or what have you, chanting kirtan, what have you, how were they hearing directly from Srila Prabhupada? What? Yes. There was material apparatus that Prabhupada's sound vibration came through. First, there was the biological apparatus, the windpipes, the vocal cords, the tongue, the lips, etc. The sound vibrated off of the tongue. It entered a microphone, which isn't even animate. It's just made of gross, dull matter. And then it traveled through some copper wires or whatever it does. I don't even know what it does. And somehow it travels from the microphone to the amplifier, and it goes through a whole bunch of more electronic circuits, and then it goes through some more wires, and it comes out of these big fat things called speakers that do whatever they do. And then the sound goes through the air, and it comes into my eardrum. So now, those devotees are very proud that we heard directly from Srila Prabhupada. And you people who 40 years later are listening to taped recordings of Srila Prabhupada, you're not hearing directly from Srila Prabhupada because it's just a recording. So you understand the argument? How do you ever hear directly from a pure devotee? It's always going through the material apparatus of our ears, etc. So hearing directly from the pure devotee means that his sound vibration is touching the saffron mercy particles which are strewn on the lotus feet of the Lord in his heart. His consciousness is entangled with those saffron mercy particles, so that when he speaks, his voice carries that potency of mercy to the heart of the recipient. And the proof that the voice of the pure devotee is so shaktified is that when the living entity hears those sound vibrations, Prabhupada said, they immediately wake up as to what is their true identity and relationship in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada admitted that he had this experience in his life. He said that in 1922, as a young man, one of his friends dragged him to the ashram of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who was in Calcutta, where Srila Prabhupada lived, and he was speaking one evening. And Prabhupada's friend invited him to go hear from this great sadhu. Srila Prabhupada reluctantly went. Oh God, I've seen so many sadhus. All right, I'll go see another one. As soon as he entered Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's ashram, where he was speaking, he and his friend paid their respectful obeisances to the sadhu. Before they could even get up from paying their obeisances, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati turned to them and he directly said, "You are educated young men. You should preach the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the English language." Prabhupada later commented that those words immediately woke him up as to what was his mission in this lifetime. Just by that first meeting, and Bhaktisiddhanta didn't even know who these people were. What was their name, where they were coming from. No small talk. Where are you from? What's your father's name? Well, what do you do for a living? How many children do you have? Just immediately, he saw down to the soul. And he gave the instruction, you should preach Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message in English. And Prabhupada said, he immediately understood that I have met my spiritual master because he has given me my devotional service for my lifetime. So this is the power of the voice of a pure devotee. So 2015, this year, marks the 50th anniversary of Srila Prabhupada's coming to America. Next year, 2016, marks the 50th anniversary of the incorporation of Iskcon. I've noticed that there's been much said. Here, we're only halfway through 2015. There's already lots and lots and lots of preparations and advertisements and broadcasting and lots being said about getting fired up to celebrate in many different ways the 50th anniversary of Iskcon. I unfortunately have practically not heard a sentence about any kind of such effort to celebrate Prabhupada's coming to America 50 years ago. So I would like to submit that millions and millions and millions of times more important than the 50th anniversary of Iskcon, which is simply a legal institution the papers were signed on a particular day. It's a wonderful institution, don't get me wrong, and we should celebrate. Millions and millions and millions of times more important than observing the anniversary of Iskcon is to observe the anniversary of Srila Prabhupada's literally sacrificing his life to execute the order of his spiritual master to come to America and vibrate transcendental sound. If Srila Prabhupada had not done that, we would not even have Iskcon. And if Srila Prabhupada had not done that, none of us would have the opportunity to hear directly from him. And this is not soft Ritvik. This is not soft Ritvikism when we strongly stress that we must every day hear directly from Prabhupada. Reading is another way, but Brahmananda Prabhu said, one time Srila Prabhupada told me that every day we should hear his books. And I was wondering, why did Prabhupada say hear? Oh, maybe Prabhupada used the wrong word. But then he meditated on that for years. And he said it took him years to realize that what Prabhupada was saying was, don't read my books. I don't want you to read my books. I want you to recite my books. Read out loud. So Brahmananda Prabhu had that realization, that when Prabhupada said, every day you must hear my books, that Prabhupada was saying, you should read out loud, so that the sound vibration comes into our ears. So this is the 50th year of Prabhupada's coming to America. So we should be celebrating every moment, not of just this year, but of every year. Half the year's already gone, and we haven't done a single thing about it. 7 months finished. And the rest of it's probably going to be absorbed in getting ready for Iskcon's birthday party. But really, unless and until we worship and glorify He whose voice is permeated with the saffron mercy particles of the Lord, unless and until we glorify and worship that person and make the opportunity for others to hear directly from him available, we won't get the proper benefit of hearing from Srila Prabhupada. Iskcon has become like a household word in India. I meet many people from India here in America when we travel and meet people all over the place. And they'll all say, oh, yes, yes, I know Iskcon. Or I'm a follower of Iskcon. I'm like, what? What do you mean you're a follower of Iskcon? That's awfully impersonal. You know, we're supposed to be followers of gurus. Sometimes I'm out distributing books on college campuses. I usually avoid the students from India because we're there to distribute books to the American students. But, you know, we do meet Indian students, so if they're, you know, fine, that's fine. So many times we'll meet students from India and we'll show them Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. Do you have Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita? No, who is it by? Oh, you know, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Do you know him? Oh, well, you know, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, Iskcon. Oh, Iskcon. Oh, yeah. I know Iskcon. I go to that temple in my hometown. But they don't know Prabhupada. Like, what? How did that happen? So anyway, we want to make Prabhupada a household word, and we want to persuade and encourage people to hear directly from Prabhupada, because we've benefited so much from hearing from Prabhupada, but unless and until we show our proper gratitude and appreciation for Prabhupada's sacrifice, how are we going to benefit from it ourselves or give others the opportunity? So every day we come to Guru Puja, at least those of us who attend Guru Puja, which, by the way, in case you didn't know it, the 12 minutes of Guru Puja that we have every morning is the most important 12 minutes of the day. So there's actually absolutely no reason why a person should not be attending Srila Prabhupada's Guru Puja every single day, unless they have some very pressing service that they've been asked by an authority to execute at that particular 12-minute slot. So unless there's some really grave reason why we can't be here, the 12-minute Guru Puja is the most important 12 minutes of the day, because there we are showing or trying to show our appreciation and gratitude to Srila Prabhupada, and without doing so, we can never benefit from the sound vibration that is emanating from his mouth into our ears. It'll simply be blocked by our steel-framed heart and the aparads that we're committing. So every morning we chant, Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chittite Korya Aikya. For those of you who attend Guru Puja, you will know that that means my only desire is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. If we want the words from his lotus mouth to actually purify our heart, we have to worship Srila Prabhupada. That is bhakti yoga. That is one of the processes that will be coming up later in the purport. Archanam. The disciple never benefits if they don't worship the guru. It'll simply be theoretical knowledge and will never get any prayojana. Hearing must not be divorced from the personal worship and service of the person guru. He's not just a statue sitting on that chair over there, but we will continue to see him as a statue if we don't come and every day fully participate with our body, mind, and words in his Guru Puja. So we will stop there and see if there's any questions or comments. Jai Jagannath Prabhu.
So in the last part of the discussion concerning Srila Prabhupada and how we should understand that, there are several things that I would probably contend in my own understanding, but I'm just going to bring up one question, maybe one question at a time. But the process of devotional service is eternal. So it's existing eternally in the past, present, and future. So when Prahlad Maharaj is speaking about the process of Shravanam, it is not exactly it wasn't spoken with MP3 players in mind or audio recordings in mind. It was spoken of in terms of Guru Padashraya, taking shelter of a Guru, hearing from the Guru. So in that sense, I find that the living Guru argument still stands in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
My concern is that because of modern technology, our understanding of the process becomes convoluted in that we think that we don't have to go through the process of hearing, taking shelter of a Guru,
Okay.
and so on.
Maybe I can just address that before you go on.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that very important question so that we can make a clarification here. As I said before, for a child to come about, you have to have the father and the mother. If one's missing, you can't get a fruit of a child. Similarly, we have to hear from Srila Prabhupada. That cannot be in any way minimized or negated. But what does it mean to hear from Srila Prabhupada? It means to follow what he's telling us. And what is he telling us? He's telling us to have shiksha and diksha gurus in our life that are living. So for people who say, I only hear from Srila Prabhupada, I don't need lesser than Prabhupada living gurus in my life. I just go directly to Prabhupada. That means they're not hearing from Srila Prabhupada. Because what's Srila Prabhupada telling us? He's telling us to have real, live, living gurus in our life. And he showed by his own example. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed by his own example. So, but if we're not hearing every day from Srila Prabhupada, how will we recognize Guru living in our life? Because Prabhupada is the gold standard. So if you want to buy gold, you have to first learn what is gold, so you don't go to the shop and buy brass and get cheated. So how will you know? How will you recognize Guru? There's so many people around. How will I recognize who is Guru? First, I have to study the gold standard. So we study the life of Srila Prabhupada, not just his words, but his actions. That's why we have so many videos and devotees speaking memories of him. So there's 2 rails on the railroad track. There's 2 rails. So in devotional service, there's 2 rails, the Pancharatrika Marg and the Bhagavat Marg. So the Pancharatrika Marg requires living Diksha Guru to impart mantras, etc. We need living Shiksha Gurus to give us the details of devotional service. Prahlad Maharaj has spoken the 9 processes of devotional service, but what about the details? Prabhupada will tell you, if you listen to Prabhupada, he will preach to you every day. You should hear, you should chant, you should offer prayers, you should remember, you should worship. But is he going to give the details? If there's 20 devotees sitting in this room, we're all going to receive the same instructions from Srila Prabhupada by hearing from him. But what about the specifics according to me, the individual? Therefore, I need living gurus who know me as a person. Oh, that devotee, they have a pride problem, so he's got to be engaged in a particular way. The 9 processes, they're like ingredients. So you put them together in this proportion and you get this, and you put them together in this proportion and you get that. So a living guru will mix and match those 9 processes for you specifically, because you have a particular anartha that really needs to be worked on, or a particular something. So the guru represents the parampara. They don't adulterate the parampara or speak something different than the parampara. They represent it in modern, contemporary lingo and analogies, and tailored for the particular student. But they cannot be divorced. Hearing directly from Srila Prabhupada cannot be divorced from hearing from living gurus. And hearing from living gurus cannot be divorced from hearing directly from Srila Prabhupada. Okay, was there a second part to the question?
That clarifies it a little. The other part is that we see that the vision of Guru is subjective, as you mentioned, because we're having a material apparatus which we're using to hear. And so what we hear is not the same. It's according to the subjective achievement in Krishna consciousness. And so also those who are disciples of Srila Prabhupada, they all have their subjective understanding of Srila Prabhupada and what they understand. And that's what they represent to us, their particular subjective understanding. And according to the development in Krishna consciousness, then accordingly the vision, the understanding of what Prabhupada is told and so on. Similarly, with us having a material apparatus, our understanding of what we hear from Srila Prabhupada is quite subjective as well. Presumably, we're on a lower, well, let's just say, we're in a lower subjective achievement than our own, let's say, guru or spiritual master, whose guru is Srila Prabhupada. So how can one's own subjective understanding of Srila Prabhupada be superior to the person they've taken shelter of to represent what Srila Prabhupada is?
We didn't say it would be superior.
Right, we didn't say that. So my question is not hearing from one's guru directly, let's say in good faith, also non-different, as you were saying, from hearing from Srila Prabhupada? And I'm presenting a hypothetical question here. Someone may not always resonate with the audio lectures, on Iskcon Desire Tree or whatever, from Srila Prabhupada. They may not always resonate or understand where Srila Prabhupada is coming from and so on. And so they've heard from a particular guru who's represented Srila Prabhupada according to his subjective understanding, and that has brought out that particular disciple's faith in Krishna consciousness and also in Srila Prabhupada, although he was not able to directly resonate, let's say, initially or with Srila Prabhupada. So then how do we...
Yes, but hearing from Srila Prabhupada heard from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And you know what he said about that hearing? What did Prabhupada say? I didn't understand a word that he said. But I continued to hear from him. Why? So what? So that was his spiritual master. Why did Srila Prabhupada continue to hear from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur even though he didn't understand what he was speaking? He understood this principle of Shravanam, that the Uttama Bhakta, not the Kanishta Bhakta, and not even the Majjhima Bhakta, hearing from the Uttama Bhakta means that our heart is going to be bombarded with the saffron mercy particles which are strewn on the lotus feet of the Lord, sitting within the heart of that Uttama Bhakta. I may not resonate with the tape recordings of Srila Prabhupada. I can't maybe understand his accent. I don't really understand what he's saying. Maybe he's not speaking anything that seems practical to me. Maybe it seems that he's got some old-fashioned subjectivity, woven within his words. That is not why we hear from Srila Prabhupada. That is fruitive mentality. I'm going to read this book about chemistry because I want to learn how to do chemistry. I'm going to read this book about baking cookies because I want to learn how to bake cookies. So I'm going to read Srimad Bhagvatam so I can have knowledge and information, and I'm going to hear all of Prabhupada's lectures so I can be an informed person and be able to speak wonderful things. That is not why we hear from the spiritual master. We hear particularly from the Uttama Bhakta, so that our heart can be cleansed by the saffron mercy particles that his voice is carrying from the lotus feet of the Lord who is situated within his heart. So persons who argue that I like hearing from my living gurus way better than hearing from Srila Prabhupada, therefore I don't really hear from Srila Prabhupada because my guru is representing what Srila Prabhupada said, but in ways that I can understand. That's all well and good. We should hear from people who have the art of being able to explain things so that we can comprehend it and get enlivened and get inspired and get motivated. But if that guru that we're hearing from is not emphasizing that we should also concomitantly hear directly from Srila Prabhupada, then one wonders if that guru is actually representing Srila Prabhupada. Because Srila Prabhupada says one has to hear from the lips of an Uttama Bhakta. So if we're not hearing from an Uttama Bhakta, then we shouldn't be all surprised why our devotional service and our bhakti is really sentimental and not reaping the fruits of prayojana. So nobody is advocating, when we stress hearing from Srila Prabhupada, we're not advocating do not hear from living devotees. Srila Prabhupada himself says we have to hear from living devotees. So hearing from Srila Prabhupada is not about information storage, retrieval and storage. Hearing from Srila Prabhupada is because his voice, we know for sure, is carrying the saffron mercy particles emanating that are on the lotus feet of the Lord.
I see a lot of your argument or presentation is based on the point that we're to hear from an Uttama Bhakta. And we know for sure that Srila Prabhupada is an Uttama Bhakta. And then my question is, how do we know for sure if we're not Uttama Bhaktas? Mm-hmm. And therefore, I mean, in other words, it is generally...
There are symptoms. If we've read Srila Prabhupada's books, we would know. What are the symptoms of an Uttama Bhakta? Symptoms of an Uttama Bhakta. They're completely relieved of the material bodily conception of life. They display the ecstatic symptoms of bhava. That's the problem. Because we're not hearing about Srila Prabhupada from his disciples. We're not watching the videos of Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, we don't even know that actually Srila Prabhupada displayed the ecstatic symptoms of a Uttama Bhakta. And he didn't do it on purpose. He did his utmost to refrain from exhibiting such ecstatic symptoms. He tried really hard, but the ecstasy, the bhava, and the prema was so strong, it broke down the dams. When the water that's coming from the river is so strong, it breaks right through the dam, and it floods the other side. So he controlled his senses like anything to not exhibit the symptoms of bhava. But the bhava was so strong, it broke down the dams of his self-control, and it poured out like a flood. So we've heard, perhaps some of you haven't, we've heard from Prabhupada's disciples how they were in the audience and Prabhupada would be speaking and the flood of prema would break down the dams of his self-control and tears would come out of his eyes and his body would tremble and his voice would choke up and he would become stunned. It wasn't an act. We can hear it in Prabhupada's voice when we listen to some of his recordings. I've heard it with my own 2 ears. Prabhupada break down crying while speaking. Prema Bhakti Yaha Hoite. For those of you who attend Guru Puja every morning and chant the verse and actually meditate on the meaning of the verse, Prema Bhakti Yaha Hoite. From him, ecstatic prema emanates. Have any of you watched videos of Prabhupada arriving at an airport? He arrives at the airport, his devotees are chanting. Back in the day when anybody and everybody could go past the security and hang out by the gates, you know. So here they were, 20, 50, 100, whatever devotees. They're doing kirtan and they're waiting for Prabhupada's plane to land. Then Prabhupada's plane lands and all these human beings come off the plane and come through the hallway. And they're doing their kirtan and they're waiting, where's Prabhupada, where's Prabhupada? As soon as Prabhupada would enter the hallway, not by their efforts, not by their free choice, all of a sudden, their kirtan went to a totally different dimension. Devotees fell on the floor, paying their obeisances. Tears would come from their eyes. Look at the pictures. Come on, we've got videos, we've got pictures, we've got recordings. Take advantage of it. I could just spend hours looking at pictures of Prabhupada with his devotees. And what do I notice when I look at those pictures? The devotees are in total ecstasy. Because an Uttama Bhakta, one who's on the level of prema, they can bring anybody to the level of prema. A Bhava Bhakta, they can bring other devotees to the level of Bhava, and they can bring non-devotees to the level of Ruchi. And we saw that with Srila Prabhupada. He would enter the airport, devotees, men, women, children, break down crying. And it wasn't sentimental, like when your relative who's been gone for 3 years comes home from the army and you cry when you see them. That's nice, but it's sentimental. Sentimental means on the level of the senses and the mind. When Srila Prabhupada entered the room, entered the airport, entered whatever, look at the pictures of the devotees. Smiles up to here, and they weren't on drugs. They were jumping off the floor, tears coming from their eyes. I've never seen such happy faces, except in those pictures, when devotees are greeting Srila Prabhupada. It's not sentimental. So if you want proof that Srila Prabhupada's an Uttama Bhakta, then maybe we should put down what we're doing and go look at pictures of Prabhupada and go look at videos of Prabhupada and go look at videos about devotees speaking about Prabhupada. Now, for fear of sounding like a sahajiya, I will share a story. I'm not a sahajiya. The other day, I was spending the night at the house of Satyabrata and Reena in Des Plaines, and their son Vedant is very sweet. And I spent 2 nights there, and both mornings, when I would see him in the morning, he'd say, "Good morning, Mataji. Did you have nice dreams? Did you dream of Kishore Kishori? Did you dream of Srila Prabhupada?" And I had to disappoint him and say, "I've never dreamt of Kishore Kishori, and I've never dreamt of Srila Prabhupada. My dreams are like either mundane or just like, mostly it's just black. I don't have dreams, whatever." So I'm just trying to say that, to preface what I'm going to say, that I'm not a sahajiya, I never dream anything spiritual, my consciousness is in the gutter. With that preface, I will explain that the very first Srila Prabhupada Vyasa Puja that I attended was 1985, here in Chicago. Okay, what's this all about, right? So here I am attending Srila Prabhupada's Guru Puja the day after Janmashtami. Janmashtami was ecstatic. That was my first Janmashtami. That was great. Everything was great. So in 1985, there were about 15 devotees at most, maybe 12 devotees in this temple, and at least 50% of them were Prabhupada disciples. So now it was time for Srila Prabhupada's Guru Puja, the Arti at noon. 12:30, whatever, on Vyasa Puja Day. And the devotees had read their offerings, and everything was fantastic. I was like high that day. And then the RT began, and they were singing probably the Guru Vastakam prayers. But anyway, kirtan was going on, and devotees were offering garlands to Srila Prabhupada. Up until that point, I never had any realizations about the deities. They were beautiful statues. I mean, I understood theoretically, but for me, they were beautiful statues. So here I am in Prabhupada's Guru Puja Arti, and one woman came. She wasn't a devotee, she just would come to the temple for prasadam every once in a while. She happened to walk in right when the Guru Puja started, so I was standing right next to her, right over here, attending the Arti. And while the Arti was going on, all of a sudden, I had this realization that Prabhupada's actually sitting there in person. And by no efforts of my own, tears just started pouring out of my eyes. I was just like uncontrollably crying. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like going like this, like I didn't want anybody to know, and I was like going like this and trying to turn, and my voice was choking up, and I was like trying to, And then I turned, and the woman standing next to me, who was like not even a devotee, she was crying also. And I turned to her and I said, why are you crying? And she said, probably for the same reason that you are. And we both had that realization that Srila Prabhupada was so pleased on that day. It was such a fantastic Vyasa Puja with Prabhupada's disciples there and everything, that he revealed himself, that I'm not a statue. So prema bhakti yaha hoite. So we got a little free sample on that day. That was early September of 1985. I think it also fell on the Labor Day weekend, just like it does this year. And I have rarely gotten any free samples since then, but that one free sample carries me through the last 30 years. So you want proof that Srila Prabhupada's an Uttama Bhakta, you have to somehow or other get that realization. You can't just accept somebody's word for it. Phew, we've gone really over time, but Nityananda Prabhu had his hand up, so.
It's already 9 o'clock, and if two things. One is on this topic that we've been discussing. I very much appreciate the emphasis that all of us should hear Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, every day or regularly. We must, because oftentimes we introduce people to, I'm using the word we just so I don't want to point at anyone, but you get the idea. We introduce people to listening to a particular spiritual master's recordings, etc., and years go away, and then you ask them, have you heard Prabhupada's recordings? And the answer is no. So I very much appreciate it. One of the concerns I have is when you emphasize, or when in this discussion I'm saying you, when there is emphasis on Uttama Bhakta, it somehow seems to, perhaps unwittingly, but seems to connotate that there cannot be another Uttama Bhakta, or that the others are not. And if there are symptoms of bhava that we have to look at, then the list is not necessarily that there is trembling, etc., which is also part of it, but there are things such as avyartha kalatvam, manashunyata, they're free of false prestige, they don't waste any time, etc., namagarne sada ruchi. So those are demonstrable symptoms or observable symptoms. And so I'm sure that's not what you meant
Yes, thank you for that
I'm
clarification.
concerned that it may seem that there isn't another Uttama Bhakta, which is not what you're saying,
Right.
I'm sure.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. And I think we were discussing that in Gita Nagari, right? That there's symptoms of a Uttama Bhakta that aren't external, like with their senses, you know. No, hearing from Srila Prabhupada, stressing hearing from Srila Prabhupada is not to imply that there's no living Uttama Bhaktas. That is not to be implied at all. But Srila Prabhupada is our founder Acharya, and whatever Uttama Bhaktas may be amongst us, they would certainly want to not put the spotlight on themselves and would want to put the spotlight on Srila Prabhupada. I cannot advertise my spiritual master to others as an Uttama Bhakta. They have to, find their spiritual master themselves, not by my saying, here he is. We could, quite safely though, point new people to Srila Prabhupada and say, here is an Uttama Bhakta. I don't think that is subjective. I think it's pretty objective and subjective. Whereas pointing to our own spiritual master or some other devotee currently might be taken by the new people as purely subjective. So that is something of the heart. It requires some realization. So again, we're bringing people to hear from Srila Prabhupada and those who represent Srila Prabhupada so that they can understand the gold standard. Because in Prabhupada's books is where they're going to hear about how to recognize anyway, So it'll be different for every individual. For no individual is the potpourri going to be of the same proportion of ingredients. I'm only stressing very strongly this point for two reasons. A, it was part of the purport. And the purport that I brought up from the fourth canto is one of my favorite passages of Prabhupada's purports. And B, because this is the 50th year of Prabhupada's arriving in America, and who really cares if he arrived in America or not? The only reason it matters is because by his coming to America, we can hear from him. And I do feel that there is, please excuse me, but I do feel there has been improper or poor preparation, if any, to observe, celebrate, appreciate Srila Prabhupada's 50th anniversary of arriving in America to save us, and we've overemphasized the 50th anniversary of Iskcon. So that is why I'm saying that, because I think the emphasis perhaps is a little, it could be a little impersonal. Like Prabhupada said, he heard his disciples chanting, Jai Guru Dev, Jaya Guru Dev. He said, what is this Guru Dev? He said, Guru Dev is impersonal, because you have a group of people chanting Jai Guru Dev. One person's thinking this guru, one person's thinking that guru, one person's thinking some other guru. He said, Guru Dev, take the name of your spiritual master. Jai Srila Prabhupada, 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 Jai Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, not Jai Guru Dev. So, again, how many people I've met who say, oh, I know Iskcon, but they don't know Prabhupada. So I'm simply suggesting that we have to be careful of the impersonal presentation of Srila Prabhupada. Because Iskcon, apparently, I never found it on the database, but apparently Prabhupada said, Iskcon is my body. That's all well and good, but there's a soul within that body. So we don't want to just introduce people to the body. We want to introduce people to the soul that resides, who gives life to the body. And if we ignore the soul or don't pay proper attention to the soul and put too much emphasis on the body, then we're in what's called bodily conception of life. So this is why I made that stress.
My second one was on that particular point, but I'm thinking I'm going to reserve it, only because I want to drag it. Maybe I'll share, because you shared your opinion, I'll share an opinion. Well taken. Whatever you said is well taken, that perhaps the emphasis is on one thing versus Prabhupada's arrival in America. I also feel, now this is my opinion, for whatever it's worth, I also feel that we cannot divorce Prabhupada's incorporating Iskcon from the foundation of he fulfilling his spiritual master's number one instruction.
Agreed.
And the formation of Iskcon, to me, is to propagate systematic hearing from Srila Prabhupada and Prabhupada's Gaudiya Siddhanta. So that's one point. Second...
I'll just add though,
Yeah,
I
please.
totally agree with you, but my point is I feel there's been a divorce.
Okay, you feel there's been a divorce. Okay.
One parent, there's two parents, and one parent is being emphasized very nicely, and the other parent is back in the shadows somewhere.
Okay.
So that was my point.
Sure, then points well taken. I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
I don't walk out of this room with either a wrong understanding or an emphasis on the other side necessarily. You know, when one parent is being in the limelight and the other is in the shadow, we sometimes put so much light on the second parent that the first one also goes into a shadow. I'm sure you want both. So I just want to make sure that when I walk out of here that I don't...
Yeah, thank you for that
Okay,
clarification.
thank you. I don't want to drag it further, but thank you.
So Iskcon actually started in 1965. The official incorporation...
Its arrival, yes.
The legal incorporation in America started in 1966. But Iskcon actually started in 1965 because first comes the soul and then comes the body. So... Okay, we're going to end there. I'm sorry. I know there were a few more hands, but it's like breakfast time. I apologize for going over time. Granthara Srimad Bhagvatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
When we're doing like college programs, normally they don't bring up like Prabhupada or of course naturally because they usually call it Bhakti yoga. And we see that like in our
Point of individual faith is...
So usually sometimes we see that when people hear, even my mother at first, when she hears the word Iskcon or, Prabhupada, we have to tell her it's disassociated from like people hear things about child abuse. It's not child abuse. So how do you disassociate, how do you go about making an indirect approach like teachings? How long can we do that without direct? Same, because people, once they hear that, they're like, oh, child don't believe in child abuse, so I'm not going to hear anything.
Right.
So is it an indirect approach that you want?
And if you notice, people who have a bad feeling about Iskcon, they don't have a bad feeling about Prabhupada.
Yeah.
When you mention Prabhupada, they don't go, ooh.
Yeah.
But when you say Iskcon, they go, ooh.
Yeah. What would you recommend? Like, you have any recommendation for that, like when we're doing like type of preachings or whatever?
Well, personally, I'm not into saying that I'm representing Iskcon.
Okay. Well, probably usually.
I just go out and represent Krishna consciousness. We try to introduce people to Prabhupada and Prabhupada's books and Prabhupada's teachings, and they don't mention Iskcon. But, when you're preaching from the temple, what are you going to do? Because you have to invite people to the temple. So it says Iskcon.
It's almost like unavoidable.